Hello and welcome to my tea time with Ask Michael K. Today we have Hailey joining us. Hailey is part of our HR team, and so far Hailey's done a great job in terms of finding the diamonds that we were looking for in order to proceed with our growth. So Hailey, if you just don't mind introducing yourself, and then obviously we will recognize that you are from America, so talk about that a bit. So yeah, over to you.
Hello, I'm Hailey. I run up the talent acquisition here at Steelo. I have about 8 years experience in kind of overall general management for an engineering firm, and then a couple years with health and safety experience. I kind of one of those jack of all trades, but I do find that my people skills are probably my best skills, and we are definitely using that to the best benefit that we can. Yeah.
And what brought you over here to the UK?
Well, I fell in love, and with love and long distance comes having to decide what country you're going to live in. And my partner and I decided that it would be best to come to the UK, and we're trying this out for a while, and we're really excited about it.
Is that the case? You like UK, the weather and all of that?
Weather's not my favorite, but coming from New Orleans, people kept asking me, or how are you going to deal with the rain in England? And actually, it rains more in New Orleans. Per year, we get way more rain in New Orleans than we do in England, so it's really not that bad. The cold is weird. Not weird, I guess I'm just not used to cold in March. By March, for us, we're usually in like no sleeves and like swimsuits already, but it's all right. I'm having a good time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it surprisingly doesn't rain as much as people say, especially in the southeast, because the rest of on the UK, yeah, it does rain, but yeah, here it's not bad. And then how did you find us? Because I know that something appealed to you, so how did it go?
The job post for the talent acquisition headhunter role for Steelo was vague and not that descriptive. It was kind of question marks. Do you like doing this? If you think you could do this role, figure out yourself how to apply. I liked the challenge. I said, I'm going to figure it out. I sent a direct message to yourself. I went onto the Steelo's LinkedIn page, looked up the general manager, sent messages to her. So it was one of those things where it was like, okay, I need to knock on their door. I'm going to figure it out. I just kind of saw through the website, through everything, that it matched up with the company that I came from, which I truly loved. I didn't want to, if I could have stayed at my old company and worked in the UK, that would have been a perfect role. But that's not always the case. I could, with laws, couldn't do that. But Steelo was, in my mind at the time, the closest thing I could find, a small, tight group where ideas are welcome and everyone is charged to do their best and to succeed together. And yeah, I'm having a great time doing it.
Yeah. And you're also very into business, or business savvy.
Yes.
Because previously you said you were the general manager of a company. Well, what size was the company?
We had a...
Just gonna ask you. Yeah, just in case.
No
Sorry.
problem.
Yeah, just continue.
So we had around 40 plus employees. It was an engineering firm. We did not sell a product, we sell our services. But we had clients, multi-million-dollar clients, multi-million-dollar turnover, which was fantastic, being that it's now 8 years old, the company, but when we first started, it was 4 of us sitting in a room. I opened the first bank account for the company. I drove down to the bank and told them, we have an idea, give us a bank account. We didn't ask for a loan or anything like that. We just, we used my mom's office back room as our headquarters for a little while, kind of helped with some friends to get it started. And from growing in the first 2 years, making some profit, not really earning all that, but then in the 5th year when there's dividends getting paid out and everyone's happy and we're getting company bonuses and rewards, we're going to play laser tag. It's really rewarding to know that you were there from day one. I, solo person, was the one that, while the owner set up the, the LLC, I was the one that went and got the computers and got the bank account, and really, it was complete partnership and teamwork from the beginning, and to see them succeed and still succeeding is, it's really rewarding.
No, well then let's hope that we can replicate the same here and continue with the growth and do our best. Now, you were one of the first person to read the Stand Back to Grow in its current version, because previously it was just me and Jeff, the co-author. So what's your opinion so far?
I think it's good. I really like the approach that it was a story, that you used a someone's story and a real life example rather than just a typical business book where you read about do this to do this to do this, do this to be successful. It was a story about how someone was involved in every aspect, but then they slowly learned to let go of control and allow the people surrounding them to help and be successful. And that's the thing where it is hard to get rid of trust. And the biggest thing I learned from that is you need to trust people, even though you don't want to. And I can agree with the owner of my previous company, always wanted his hands in everything. He was the one that knew how to do everything perfect. But at the same time, like the book says, perfect isn't always attainable, but you can strive for perfection. And that stand back attitude where you really rely on everyone else, I think is wonderful. It's something that the employees then become, they feel rewarded and they feel important. And that importance, I think, will then help people progress in their own way and help the company progress.
Yeah, which partly is the story of probably 95% of business owners who start their business. Bearing in mind that the story within that book is not 100% my story, so I was never suicidal.
Good.
Not that I'm giving away any content, but no, it was never the case. But indeed, there comes a point where it's the owner just becomes so overwhelmed because every single sort of question goes through their heads, and then it just is disastrous. So based on that, I know you did have a few questions. So what would you like to ask?
Okay, so I guess one of the first questions that young entrepreneurs have. So in the book, you see that the company had already been started. The company was in 5 years already down the line. Let's reverse back to year one. If a young entrepreneur, say, with 0 other business entities or like whatever, it's their first one, they come up with a product or service that they believe can make a difference and make money. You know what? Let's go real. Businesses are money machines, right? That's what we all want to know. That's what we all should know, and that's what they are. No matter what they're selling, at the end of the day, they're a money machine. What would be the first step that a young entrepreneur or businessman would need to do once they come up with their idea for the product or service they want to sell? Would it be create a bank account? Would it be find office space? Would it be register the company, find financial backers? What is the step? What are the steps that get you from year one to year 5?
Okay, the most important thing, and this is like the most, everything else is way below, is to test the market. Without knowing whether actually people want your service or product, there's no point in doing all the other stuff. So and I really recommend reading the book The Startup Way by Eric Ries. That is a classic in terms of how to start a business. And actually starting a business starts before you actually set up the business, because you can dry run it without even setting up a bank account or having it as a formal business. And actually quite a lot of successful businesses are actually start in the garage. Mm-hmm. Not because people want to start in a garage because everyone else has done it, it's just because that is a natural way to verify whether your idea has actually interest in the market. And I think there's an example in this book with Zappos. Is that the shoe shop in America?
Yes, Zappos is an online shoe retailer.
Yeah, so the way the guy started it is he took his camera, he went to a local shoe shop, started taking photos of the shoes in that shop. He then created a website showing those shoes, offered it as an online store, and when people placed an order and paid, he then went physically to the shop, bought the thing that someone ordered, and then he went to the post office to post it. So that was the way he validated his idea. It cost him almost nothing, apart from his time writing the website, probably in HTML back then. But that is the way to do it. Not to go out and get a massive loan or ask for money from other parents or families and fools, as they call it, and friends. Because it's very easy to burn cash. Mm-hmm. You can burn any amount of cash. If you've got too much money, you can fly with your helicopter or hire a helicopter for your meetings, and suddenly you'll just run out of money. Real businesses, true businesses, are built on customer validation. So you have to know that the customers need what you offer. And then, it's all the admin stuff like setting up a bank account, registering your business and so on. Those are the administrative tasks, but what I also always say is that those are the most easiest steps.
Of course.
People like sometimes say, oh, I've got this idea, but for the last year I still haven't registered my business and I can't get myself to do it. I'm like, well, look, if you don't have that burning desire to succeed before you even started, and starting the business as in terms of registering it is a task that you just can't get yourself to it, just ignore it. Just stop there and just do something else.
Yeah, okay. So with these dry runs, what's another, so Zappos was a good example. Do you have another example like that where you take your idea and you kind of, test the market with it? What would be another example of testing the market?
There are plenty of them. Facebook is another one.
Okay.
Facebook wasn't started where they said, okay, well, let's make money. Now let's think of a tool that we can conquer the world with. It didn't happen like that.
Yeah.
They just had a real problem and they found a real solution. They wanted to be able to communicate between themselves as students at university. And suddenly it gained traction, more and more students were interested, and suddenly it blew up. It became a massive, as we know, it took over the world, exactly.
Yes, exactly.
Another example is actually Airbnb. Their business idea came out of desperate need for money because they were renting an apartment in San Francisco and they didn't have the money to pay the rent. I think there were 3 artists and they didn't have money to pay the rent. And there was a large conference happening coming up in the next few days, and they decided to offer floor space because all the hotels were booked out and so on. So they posted an ad somewhere on whatever portal it was, and they realized that actually this is a niche that no one's explored yet. That people are desperate just to sleep somewhere. They don't need all the fancy stuff that hotels offer. And then suddenly from that idea they thought, well, okay, let's start scaling it up. So again, the same example where they started almost for free, or maybe even for free because maybe they didn't pay anything for the ad.
Yeah.
And suddenly a grand idea just sort of popped up from nothing.
Out of necessity almost, yeah.
Yeah. And then I guess same as even our plastics, we obviously follow that idea. Instead of going full on and creating the business, we started very small, testing the market, and suddenly people were very much interested in the offer, and only then we started building the business around it. The alternative would be to spend silly amounts of money on the most perfect machinery out there and then only offer the product, whereas we started from the other end. First offer the product, and to be honest, most of the images there were done by myself in the evenings using Google SketchUp. So even though we do have an established business, that was a startup, and then we stuck to the ideas of a lean startup, is just do the bare minimum. And the best sort of rule of thumb is something called MVP, so minimum viable product. And the definition of that is come up with a solution that is for free and takes no more than 2 hours. And those are the best ideas, and then they tend to then stick, because if they're so easy to implement, that means they're also easy to use by end users.
I think that's a really good point you made about, instead of going and buy the machinery and then trying to make the sales, try and make a few sales with what you have, and then because if you get the machine and have all this inventory, yes, you have assets, but they're assets that they're not liquid cash, so you have to still sell them. Whereas if you kind of go and you see, okay, this is taking off, now I can invest that money, and I know that the orders will be processed. I guess I think that some people do think the other way, that in order to sell a product, they have to be able to have all this machinery. They put all this money in the machinery, but then 6 months later, they have all the machinery, they're up to date with where they want to go, but there's no sales, or the market already shifted. And so, okay, that's a good point.
Yeah, another way to look at it is that you have to be embarrassed with your product. And if people are still buying the product you're embarrassed with, that means that you're surely onto something.
Because then you can work to perfection.
Yeah, exactly. And then that means that even more people will be interested. But if you worked on perfection beforehand and no one's interested, well, that's a clear sign that you've just wasted your time and money on whatever you were working on.
I've never even thought of it that way, but that it makes complete sense. You're just like you said about, you could have money from investors, parents, friends, family, you could blow it, but if you have the idea and you test the market first, so it's literally about testing the market.
Yeah. Another thing which is very important, and this comes also from the lean startup movement, is that when you test the market, don't just ask your friends whether they would buy it from you, because everyone will say, oh yes, I will, it's something I've been dreaming of and all of that. So the way to do it is, if you have, let's say you've got an idea for a product, and let's say it's me asking you, well, look, I've got this idea for this product, would you buy it? And you're like, oh yeah, Michael, I'll buy it. Then I'll say, okay, just wait a moment, I'm going to go and grab it from my boot. and suddenly you're like, oh, do you know what, I don't have cash, or no, let's
Yeah.
leave it for another
Back
day, and
out
so
of
on.
it.
So that is when you truly understand whether people want it or not. Another way of looking at it is to know how to ask the question. And a sort of flagship example is about asking people, would you like to have white teeth? 99% of people will say yes, because that is the right answer. So you might think that your new, I don't know, tooth cleaning product is the next big thing, because 99% of respondents said yes, they want white teeth, and you suddenly come up with that product and no one's interested, because the real or the proper question should have been, how often do you go and take care of your teeth? And that will then show you actually probably only 5% of people actually do spend the money on whitening their teeth.
Yeah, and who would want to? Yes, you want white teeth, but who's going to spend the money to want the white teeth?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so okay,
Yeah.
True. That's good. It's a good point. Yeah. All right, I'll make sure I don't ask friends.
Yeah, because I mean that's the role of friends, is to support you. I mean that's why we have friends. So if you've got this great idea and you're really onto it, a friend won't say no, because why should they say no?
Exactly.
They just want to encourage you. And it's like, yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah,
Continue.
and of course ride the coattails. They're like, yeah, you start it up, and I'll be right there for you. Yeah, of course. That's a really good point. I always thought about more the administrative side. I guess that's because of the roles I've kind of done. I've always helped with the administrative side, not really the market research side. And I was more, my previous roles have always been more selling services rather than selling a product. And so, but thinking about, and the service that we were selling was always needed. It was engineering services for midstream oil and gas. In the South Louisiana petrochemical belt, there's always going to be a need for that. Until we change to, more eco-friendly, and, but at the same time, oil and gas will still be needed to create these things. But the market research side is one side that I am very, let's say, inexperienced with, and I think that's a good lesson for me right now.
Yeah. I mean, there are many things to it, because the other thing that I always mention is to remember about scalability. And there's this big movement nowadays for something called solopreneurs. So one-man bands, one person who's the entrepreneur, but actually they also jack of all trades. They do everything. And by definition, that is not a business, because that is just a job. It's a glorified job, because it's as a corporation or as a limited company and so on. But that's the other thing that people overlook when they start a business, is whether this business is actually scalable. Because there will come a time, probably in the next 3 or 5 years, where that person will be overwhelmed. Because if someone's good at something, let's say someone's a good hairdresser, then naturally they will have more customers. It's natural.
Yes.
Existing customers will come back and they will start referring others, so suddenly the customer base will grow. But then if it's their skills, their manual skills that make that business, it will be impossible for them to scale.
Correct. You only have X amount that you can do.
Exactly, and that becomes the most horrible jobs in the world, because there's no escaping from it. You can't even go on holidays because you're letting down your customers. If you want to go for 1 month holiday,
you're a one-man show.
Exactly. So another thing to bear in mind is ask yourself whether the business that you want to create, whether it is actually indeed scalable. And sometimes the same thing, let's say hairdressing, could be scalable, but if it's done by others, not by yourself. So then your role is not to be the hairdresser, but actually to be the person facilitating a company that provides that kind of service. And that's also something people never take into account when starting a business. Because there's this natural trap, and friends and families are the first one to point you in that direction, is that if you're good at something, start a business that does that thing. So this comes from the E-Myth, where let's say someone's a good vet, so they start a veterinary clinic, but then that person is the face of the business, and then it is very difficult for that person to stand back from that role, because they are known for being the best vet in town. And imagine a scenario where someone calls you saying, look, your uncle or whoever passed away, and now there's this vet clinic for you to run. And I can bet that you would probably do a much better job at running that clinic because you're not a vet, rather than if you were a qualified vet. Because if you're a qualified vet, the first thing you want to do is take care of the pets and animals and treat them. Whereas because you're not a vet, by default, your role will be to overlook the operations. So that's why quite often someone who is a specialist and then starts a business finds it much more difficult to then scale up.
It kind of reverts back to your book a little bit about how the main character, he by trade was a really good design engineer, but he wasn't as good or efficient, I would say, in the other roles, the administrative roles, the accounting, the payroll, the just the overall management of the employees. And once he knew to, I guess spoilers, I don't know, but once he knew to kind of delegate, then everything was better, and he was able to kind of focus on things he enjoyed enjoyed again. He was able to go back to that, and
and with that, and it's something we will add to the book. Bob, the main character, must understand that the company is now that product. He has to be the engineer, but not of the product, but of the business. He now has to make sure that the business works like a well-oiled machine.
Right.
And it is. If we look at it, it has to be a machine, because there's so many sort of different things happening in a business, but it's nothing different than a mechanical part or mechanical device that has to also work.
Like an engine. You start it, but then the engine runs itself.
Yeah. And that is the shift.
Give it oil and gas and stuff, but
every now and then, which is the role of the owner then, is to make sure everything works well and add oil every now and then to it, just to ensure it continues to work.
Now, about scalability and growing, there's a part about treading water, and about if businesses aren't looking or aren't growing, then they're just they're stagnant, and that's true. But how can some business owners find that next place to grow, whether it's to scale up or to pivot in the direction of a new product? Like, where would you think that, like, is there a kind of a definitive point of when you can make that change to grow? Or because I have a friend I know that runs a business, and it's just the same thing over and over again. There's no new idea, and there's no like scalability to grow. It's just kind of just staying at where it's at. But that's the complacency. It annoys me, but they're happy with it. But where would be a point where you know that the business is ready to grow?
Yeah, well, to start with, a business must always seek innovation. Without innovation, a company will die sooner or later, because that's the way, the world is moving forward. So if we're not progressing, then we will fall behind. But then the best way to approach it, that if it is an established company, you should treat that as a massive container ship. And it takes a lot of miles for that ship to turn, so that ship basically has to go forward. But then in order to explore all the options, you should send motorboats left and right to see, okay, let's see what's on the left, what's on the right, and then see what's happening. And those are these sort of small startups or small projects that we explore various ideas. And you have to be quite rigorous when it comes to cutting off those motorboats. If you go in one direction and you see, well, actually it's not really a viable option, just ignore it. And yes, you might lose some money when doing it, but so
it's not the whole motorboat.
Exactly, yeah. So it's similar with us. We sending these motorboats left and right. We involved in 3D printing and the online store and all the other stuff, and then we'll see which one works. And every business would like to be ahead of the game, because the people that are the first ones to come up with a product, they tend to then sort of have the advantage of being the first and quite often take over the market, which was slightly the case with our screens. We were literally one of the first ones, and it was funny when coming up with a price. There was no price benchmark. We could come up with any price, and it was the benchmark. So there are advantages. But then, it's something that's, like I said, every business would like to be in that position, but sometimes it's very difficult to just innovate and bang, come up with that next big thing. Because like with the examples we talked about before, like Airbnb and so on, that idea popped up because of a desperate need rather than a Wall Street company thinking, okay, well, how can we now benefit from online portals where we could match renters with landlords? So it's something that you should strive for, but don't beat yourself up if someone else has come up with a better idea, because it will happen.
I think the analogy of the ship and the small motorboats is it's really good, because the big ship is the company, but then you need to invest a little bit of time, whether it's whether you hire someone to kind of be that thinker, that to say, hey, I want you to, like, well, this is our company. I want you thinking about other things. Think about, we're good at how Steelo is good at manufacturing. We know we are good at manufacturing, and we can look into other avenues in manufacturing. I think that's a really good analogy with the big ship and then the little ones, where if you lose a small boat, it's all right. You're not losing the whole, you're not losing the cruise ship. You're only losing a tugboat.
But on the other hand, once one of those motorboats comes back with some good feedback, you have to have the guts to make the change of that massive ship. You have to say, okay, guys, we're now steering right.
Yeah.
And that is never a nice experience for everyone, because quite often people fall
Comfortable.
bored. No, some of them will have to drop out because they're like, well, no, we always used to do this, so why are we now changing on to something else? Let's stick to what we always done. It was nice and safe and so on. So unfortunately, if people don't adapt, then suddenly they become surplus to requirements, which is a big shame. But it does happen, and also quite often there's a lot of marketing involved and a lot of reorganization required to make that turn. And unfortunately, it is one of those necessities which is under the CEO or the owner to make those calls, and they are the most difficult calls.
Yeah, it's risk, but sometimes the risk pays off, and that's why it's a risk.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate your insight.
Yeah, and you as HR, how do you see growth and employees? How do you think that employees should grow with the business?
I think the best way to say it is, if you find employees with the right mindset, and how we always talk about culture and having the right culture and values. If you're hiring in the beginning for people that are already looking for growth, if they ask the questions in the interview, well, if I start at this role, what can I do next? That's how you know that someone's, they want to look to more. And if you already know that these people are kind of already eager to prove themselves in this role, but they also are willing to bite off more, and they're willing for that, then I think you're in the right path. And then if with HR and with the company, if you can then provide certain learning and development for employees, and also a little bit of reward, sometimes a good job to someone really goes a long way. Like you could walk over to someone and just say, hey, Bob, you did a really good job last week. I'm really thank you for that. I also read your report, and I think that's a really good idea. Do you mind spending maybe a couple hours next week looking into that a little bit further? I think there might be an idea there. Those little bits of encouragement with the right employee really, I think, are the best things. It's the human. HR is, it's human resources, but it really is the human touch. And it is a lot about laws and employment laws and all the bureaucracy and red tape. But if you take that away and you stick to the human side of it, at the end of the day, the right people in your company are the ones that help you make money, and then you get to reward them and stuff like that. So you have to remember that, yes, there's all the bureaucracy involved with HR, but I like to try and stick with the human side and give those good jobs and that kind of stuff. And then if you really do hire the people that are already thinking about, okay, well, I'm going to come in as a trainee design engineer, but I already know I want to be, the design manager. I want to go on like that. If you know they already have that mindset, then you're already in the right place.
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned, and Hailey's done a great job so far. So yeah, these are the type of people you really want to work with, because then you can conquer everything, literally. Yeah. So thank you very much, Hailey, for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day. Then.
I appreciate it. Thank you for all your insight.
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks.